So going back to Lucy being born, she was born on the Wednesday, and we had a sort of I don't think I really talked about it in the last episode because we literally talked all about the kind of process of Lucy being born and the C-section and stuff. So we didn't get to the point where Lucy had kind of come into the world and what happened next. So I'm just going to sort of briefly talk through that. And obviously you'll remember, Mum, because it was quite a stressful day or a stressful 24 hours. And it was a funny one because she was born so kind of happy and healthy and no one could quite believe it. And I think I talked in the last episode about the paediatrician leaving the room while they were still sewing me up from the section and me trying to grab her going out the door to say, you need to look after Lucy, not me. Why are you leaving? And then Lucy was put onto me skin to skin. And I never expected that. And it was, as per every episode, I'm about to cry. It was a very emotional moment when they put her skin to skin to me because I would just had built myself up so much, hadn't I, with all of the different discussions with the doctors that because of her heart condition, she'd be taken away immediately. So they didn't take her away. We went into the normal area you go into sort of post-birth where you just kind of get used to this child being with you. And then you get moved onto a ward. And that sort of, I don't know how long we were in that room. John might remember, but it was probably a couple of hours maybe in that room where we just literally would just stare. We just stared at her. It could have been 6 hours. I have no idea. We just sat and stared at her and both kept crying. And he was able to kind of, get hold of her and give her a hug. And I've got a lovely picture of John doing that, which was beautiful. And then they moved us onto the ward. And what transpired is they moved us onto the ward that all the other mums went on. And that night, I was trying to feed Lucy, and I'd been promised by the feeding midwife prior to Lucy being born that she would come and help me with the feeding because I'd never fed a baby before, and I was really worried about it because, there's a lot of talk of children with Down syndrome having sort of the weak muscles around their, their jaw and everything, and will they be able to, or their tongue or whatever, will they be able to latch and all the rest of it. But I felt like she was. I wasn't sure, but I felt like she was. And I had harvested all that colostrum. Do you remember? I was obsessed. Mum, I got 2 mils today. I kept texting you, didn't I? It was a very bizarre thing to be doing before she was born. But I did all of that, and she had all of that colostrum. And then through the night, they ran out of that colostrum because obviously she was born quite early on the Wednesday morning, and then through the Wednesday night they ran out, and that's when they said you need to really be trying to feed her. But of course it was the middle of the night. I'd had a section. I was in a lot of pain. I didn't really know what I was doing. And the next thing, I just remember a midwife standing at the end of the bed saying, "Get her off you. She's not latching properly. All she's going to do is hurt you. You obviously can't feed her. Get her off you." So I did, and it was like, well, what do I do then? So I put her back in a cot, which was, I remember being extremely painful. Just turning and trying to lift her into the cot was excruciating. So I didn't want to keep doing that.
Well, it cuts through all your muscle, don't they? Cesarean.
Yeah. So I did that, and I just kind of left her there, and she went to sleep. I think I must have gone to sleep. And then John arrived in the morning, and John had her on him, cuddling her, and she was asleep still. And then the paediatrician came to do her rounds, and with Lucy having Down syndrome, I don't think she went to everybody, but she came to us to check Lucy over. And she said, she seems very sleepy. Are you aware that she's more sleepy than she should be? And we were like, no. We just thought she was a baby and she was asleep.
Yeah.
And she was like, let me just do a quick pinprick test and just have a look at her bloods. So they literally just stuck a pin in her toe, did the bloods, and her blood sugar was dangerously low because she hadn't had anything to eat since probably, the evening before. She hadn't had anything through the night. So it was quite scary. And that situation was what I imagined it to be like when I had my section, that didn't really end up transpiring, with all of these doctors and nurses descending on you and lots of kind of panicked. And with it being still, it was 2021, but people were still wearing masks. So you could only really see people's eyes. And you can tell when somebody's panicking in their eyes. And I saw the panic in their eyes, and I was like, oh my God, what is going on? And they immediately put a feeding tube in, and then they moved us round to another ward, which is like an intermediary ward between the normal standard ward and the PICU ward. And they put us on that ward, and it turns out that's the ward we should have gone on to in the first place. So I did speak to the consultant afterwards, and he's assured me it wouldn't happen again. If a child's born with Down syndrome, they would always go on to that ward, where the midwives are a little bit more proactive and have experience from PICU. That's where they tend to move from PICU onto that ward, and they're able to kind of support you a bit more. I was obviously just left to my own devices, and I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And they put a feeding tube in and got some formula into her. And within half an hour, she perked up and her blood sugars came back to normal. But we did have sort of 2 or 3 days of kind of, is she okay? Making sure she was getting enough, of the formula I was trying to express to give her my milk. And it was, and it was because of COVID. I remember you were desperate to come in and see her, but I was like, it's a bit tricky, because they're not really allowing visitors. John was allowed to come, but they were a bit funny about additional sort of grandparents and things coming. And I kept saying, I will be home quickly. I feel like I will. And we were, we were worried with it being a bank holiday, we were going to be kept in till the Tuesday. But we somehow, because the paediatrician was fantastic and I think felt bad about what had happened on the Wednesday night, she pushed for us to get home on the Saturday, and she pulled a few strings, and we got all the tests done that we needed to get done, like hearing. They had to do an echo on her heart to make sure there wasn't anything dramatically different to what they were expecting to see. They did all of that and sent us home, and we arrived through the door. And I think you and my brother and his wife were already there, weren't you, in the house waiting.